So part of the reason why I like making these trade price revealed videos is because it lets me keep tabs on players in the NHL, and it allows me to try to compare. It compares different players with different situations and different circumstances as to what the market value would be for these guys. For Phil Kessel, we had seen that he is a struggling scorer who is getting a lot of assists on a bad Arizona team, and I mean, the asking price that the Arizona Coyotes might have to settle for is a third-round pick, even though they might be asking for a second. We had ourselves conversations about other players over the past few years, talking about guys like Jack Eichel and Jake Chychrun and JT Miller and Taylor Hall, etc. And so now that the trade deadline is coming up, we're at the beginning of March here. By the way, happy March, everybody. Can't believe it's already March 2nd. We have ourselves a bigger conversation about rentals, because as we have seen in the past few years, Barclay Goodrow, Blake Coleman, guys that get swapped around at the deadline, sometimes get a lot more than you would initially expect. Now, the two examples I laid out are both guys that went to Tampa, and they were both grindy guys, two-way guys that were fitting into the middle of that lineup. Never really the top scorers go over to Tampa Bay, because Tampa doesn't really need that. But we have ourselves a conversation about Claude Giroux that I wanted to go out there and highlight because it kind of gets a bigger conversation going as to just the magnitude of what these players could be getting for their teams. So, if we go over onto NHL Watcher's Twitter account, he says right here what Darren Dreger highlighted on TSN. Dreger on TSN says that if Claude Giroux agrees to be dealt, the ask would be a first-round pick, a prospect, and a young NHL player. Again, Giroux has to waive his no-move clause. That remains to be seen if he agrees to. Now, the reason why the entire Claude Giroux thing is so interesting is because he is 34 years old. He is making $8.275 million a season, and he has been such a stud for the Philadelphia Flyers the past decade and a bit pretty much. There's so much pizzazz, there's so much star power, there's so much production that Claude Giroux has given the Philadelphia Flyers over the years, and a lot of Flyers fans would go out there and talk about how, oh, they wasted the prime of his career, he was so good for so long, but look at what the Philadelphia Flyers accomplished in that time span. You had a playoff run in 2010 that saw you go to the finals, you lost in the finals, and then what? There's a lot of, okay, what-ifs with the Philadelphia Flyers, but long story short, no real extended level of playoff success for this team. Claude Giroux had 7 games played in 2014, 6 games played in 2016, 6 games played in 2018, and 16 games played in 2020 in the postseason. That's about it, if you want to exclude that playoff run in 2010. Either way, though, because Claude Giroux is the superstar that he is, and because he's on the final year of his contract, there's a lot of speculation going around as to whether or not he actually would waive his no-move to head over to a playoff team to go out and actually try to get more games played in the postseason, maybe win himself a cup, do all that great stuff. Now, for Giroux specifically, when I hear that the asking price would be a first-round pick, a prospect, and a young NHL player, it really feels like to me that the Philadelphia Flyers would be going the quantity over quality route. Because, to me, I see all the other rentals on the market, and I see what these guys usually go for. As we said, Barclay Goodrow, Blake Coleman, these guys went for first. Phil Kessel's in a territory where the Coyotes want a second, but they might have to settle for a third. Is Claude Giroux that much better than Phil Kessel? With 1 year left on his contract, and heck, not even 1 year, like a few months left on his contract, that the difference between a Kessel, who is a right-handed forward who can score, who can assist, and who is a star-studded player who has had a reputation of success in this hockey league, and Claude Giroux, who is a right-handed forward who can score, who can assist, and who has had a reputation of star-studded success in this hockey league, is the difference really so much that Kessel might have to settle for a third? Claude Giroux, the asking price will be a first, a prospect, and a young guy. Like, this would probably be one of the more expensive rentals out there, right? For Tyler Toffoli, when he was traded, he got himself a first-round pick, there was Emil Heineman in there, and then there was another draft pick secondary to the first. That's a guy that was going out there for a few more years to Calgary. Emil Heineman isn't the best prospect in the world, but he is a pretty good one. And so when I see Tyler Toffoli get traded for that, I say, okay, well, that price of a first and another young guy and another prospect, that's probably the price more akin to a guy that's got years, right? I mean, Claude Giroux is a rental in this situation, and so if he gets traded, I'm starting to think that the team that acquires Claude Giroux needs to be gosh darn 110% sure that they're going to make it to at least the second round. Because, in my opinion, it would be kind of foolish to have a tweener team, a wildcard team going out there and trading away a first and a prospect and a young NHL player for essentially a playoff run with Claude Giroux if you're not guaranteed to being good enough to actually make it past. Like, this is sort of the Vancouver move from 2020 with Tyler Toffoli and all that. The Vancouver Canucks in 2020 were not that great of a team. Like, they had some good scores, but they were not a powerhouse. They were not a Colorado. They were not a Tampa Bay. They were not, you know, a Pittsburgh in the late 2010s. This was just a good team. But they went out there, they traded prospects away, and they traded draft picks away. They got Tyler Toffoli, which was a good acquisition, but he was a rental. They went far in the playoffs because, hey, they actually did do well. They overachieved in a lot of people's eyes. But what happened after? They didn't re-sign Toffoli. They lost out on the prospects, and all of a sudden, a few months after that, the team is in shambles because the virus hits the team and they are absolutely trash and the D-core is really not great. This is kind of an example that I'm hinting towards. If you're a playoff caliber team that is guaranteed to being super good, like people are throwing their money for you to win the Stanley Cup this year and the betting odds, then okay, I could understand that kind of team going out there and giving up a first, a young prospect, a young prospect, yeah, all prospects are pretty young, a prospect and a young player for Claude Giroux. I don't see a team that is in a tweener role, a wild card team, a team that some people would be like, okay, we're just kind of happy to be here in the playoffs, making this kind of a trade, unless Philadelphia eases up on what that trade price is, because that's a really expensive price for essentially 2 months of Claude Giroux. Now, if you're going out there and saying, okay, we plan to re-sign this guy, we want to get him back, he's 34, 35, 36 years old, we want him on our team then I can understand maybe the idea of going out there and getting this kind of a price down, but you have to be super sure. Like, if you lose out in the first round after trading for Claude Giroux, let's say you give up your first and a good prospect and a young NHL player, that's a boatload of assets to have given up on just to say we had Claude Giroux on our team for 2 months. And so, I think NHL teams have to be super cautious about this. If you want my honest opinion, I like Claude Giroux a lot, but if Phil Kessel's on the market for a second or third round pick only, I'm kind of pitching for that guy. He's cheaper too. Arizona's probably going to be able to retain salary, and I know there's a magnitude of difference on the ice in terms of what Claude Giroux brings scoring-wise than Phil Kessel, but Kessel's still good enough that I think the difference of a third for a first and a prospect and a young guy, it's so massive that I would rather just have Phil. But either way, Philly fans, let me know in the comments all your thoughts about this entire conversation over here. Claude Giroux and the asking price being a first, a prospect, and a young NHL player. Tyler Toffoli got something similar, but Tyler Toffoli's a lot cheaper, and he's got a lot more time left on his contract. He also is younger than Claude Giroux. I understand that Claude Giroux is Claude freaking Giroux, and I've been saying in these videos the entire time, I do believe this guy has been one of the most underrated names of the entire 2010s when it comes to just good hockey players, but $8 million a year, 2 months left, or 3 months left, whatever it is. I'm just using 2 months as an example because it makes it sound a little bit more drastic. A first, a prospect, and a young guy? Huh. That's an interesting price. Philly fans, let me know in the comments all your thoughts about this. Do you realistically expect to get this amount of value for Claude Giroux on the trade market? Do you think you're actually going to go out there and make a trade for this guy? Of course, he has to waive his no move, so if he doesn't do that, then this entire conversation is kind of pointless, but still, there's been so much conversation about him moving that I felt like it was appropriate to go out there and make this video in the first place. If you're a fan of a playoff team, would you rather go after Claude Giroux, or would you touch Phil Kessel instead? I was kind of pitching Kessel because he's a lot cheaper, but I could totally understand why anybody would be like, okay, but Claude Giroux, come on, it's Claude Giroux. Like you said it yourself, he's underrated. Let me know in the comments all your thoughts about both of these two players, just for the sake of comparison. We're going to make more videos, I guess, as the trade price reveals come out, because as teams start making guys more available, and as NHL insiders start leaking those details to the public, it's really interesting for me to kind of make a map as to who's worth what and what teams are asking for, because it allows us to compare and contrast. Let me know in the comments all your thoughts about this Phil Kessel, Claude Giroux thing. I hope you enjoyed this video, Rosén, and bye.